Welcome to Let's Talk Bayfront, a monthly lunchtime chat about different aspects of the Bayfront Parkway Central Corridor Improvement Project planned for the City of Erie. I'm your host, Jill Harry, the Press Officer and Community Relations Coordinator for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation's Northwest Region. The Bayfront Parkway Central Corridor Improvement Project. It's a big plan with lots of components. So the goal of this program is to break them down into smaller pieces and invite some experts to help us dive deeper into each topic. And we want to hear from the public along the way. Those joining us live can submit questions through the Q&A box. And for those listening later on, you can reach us via the email address bayfrontproject@pa.gov. As time allows, we will get to as many of the questions on today's topic as we can. Quick reminder, if you are joining the live session, you can turn on captions in a variety of languages. Just click on the three dots on the toolbar at the top of your screen and choose the language that's best for you. We are recording this session, so it will be posted on the website along with others from the monthly series, and you can find those at penndot.gov/district1. We plan to hold our chats monthly, and starting in November, we'll be shifting. So we have been doing them on the third Tuesday of the month, but we'll be moving to the fourth Tuesday of the month. So if you like to listen to them live, you should note that the next episode will start at 12:05 on February 22nd. So make sure to mark your calendars, tune in, submit your questions, and links to that session will be posted on the website as I mentioned earlier, and also in the Bayfront Parkway Project Facebook group. We are kicking off a new year with a guest, Jim O'Mara. Jim works for MS Consultants, which has worked with PennDOT to plan and design the Bayfront Parkway Central Corridor project. Today, we are going to focus on the pedestrian and bike features included in the plan because there are a lot of those throughout the corridor. So with that, we welcome Jim to the show. Welcome, Jim.
Morning, Jill. Or afternoon, I guess.
As has become our custom here, we start off with an easy question. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you became involved in the Bayfront project.
Well, thanks first for having me on today, Jill. For you and your team, I think these podcasts are a great way for folks to listen in and certainly learn a little bit more about the project. As for a little background on myself, I've been with the MS Consultants team since 2004. Currently the project manager on the design consultant side for this Bayfront Parkway project, working very closely with PennDOT project manager Tom McClelland, who I know has been on this podcast recently. I've got over 15 years of design experience, with all sorts of transportation projects ranging from intersection improvements, alternative analyses, bridge replacements, roadway and highway reconstruction, as well as site development projects. MS Consultants and myself became intimately familiar with this project back in 2017 when PennDOT District 1 concluded the study of the entire Bayfront Parkway corridor and selected MS Consultants to focus on the central corridor improvements at the intersections of Sassafras, State, and Holland Streets. On a personal note, I live in Pittsburgh with my wife, Erin, our 8-month-old son, Oliver, and our 3 Labrador retrievers, Juno, Riley, and Moose. I'm a big fan of spending some time outdoors, and honestly, one of my favorite places to visit is Presque Isle State Park. Do a little fishing in the morning, hiking and biking throughout the day, and then finish it off with a cold dip in the lake. So with all that said, I guess we can jump into things.
Well, you sound like you got to be a busy guy with a small kid and 3 dogs. You're a brave person.
Oh, yeah. Keep me on my toes, that's for sure.
Well, as we already mentioned, this is a very large project, so there's a lot of different aspects to consider. When did pedestrian and bike features become a focal point of the design?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, ever since day one of this project, improvements for pedestrian and bicyclists were certainly a priority. As part of that initial study of the overall corridor that I mentioned previously, there was an online survey that was completed by over 500 participants. Of particular interest, one of those exercises in that survey involved participants placing pins on a map to essentially show where they would like to see improvements and what they would like those improvements to be. And pedestrian and bicycle accommodations were definitely at the top of that list. With that survey, another question that was posed was, how the folks would like the Bayfront Parkway to function. While some on one end of the spectrum wanted it to be solely focused on cars with very little bike and ped amenities, the other end of the spectrum, there was folks that wanted it to be exclusive for bikes and peds and very limited, vehicular connectivity. But the vast majority, I think it was of upwards of 60% or so of the respondents basically wanted a blend of both. They wanted both, amenities for vehicles, but also with peds and bikes. So that's something to note there. So while bikes and beds, is part of any PennDOT project or transportation project, at that, their needs they're emphasized on this project based on the feedback that we've received over the years. So much so that the needs of peds and bikes were included in the overall project's purpose and need statement, as one of the requirements for developing the preferred alternative.
So we heard from the public that that's what they wanted us to consider the ped and bike improvements. So how did we decide what should be included and where we should include that? I mean, was it just a matter of filling in holes in the bike paths or the sidewalks, or how did we get down to the nitty gritty of what and where?
Yeah, so another great question. So sometimes replacing what is already there is the solution to many projects, but in this case, while it might not look nice on the surface, the project needs wouldn't necessarily be met. There's needs that were identified as part of the study, which included, enhancing the multimodal connections through and across the Bayfront Parkway corridor, and that includes all modes of transportation, not just vehicles, but pedestrians, bicyclists, transit, everything. Another need was increasing safety, and then another, the last need was improving efficiency of the corridor. So once those needs were identified, that's when the design team develops alternatives to address each one of those needs, and then we evaluate them in determination of the preferred alternative. So even once the preferred alternative is selected, the improvements continue to be refined and enhanced based on feedback that we receive from the public through forums like this, through project stakeholders, discussions with them, as well as independent peer reviews.
So it sounds like it's a long process. Then it's not just simply like, oh, we should put in more sidewalk and then we leave it at that. Are we able to do like traffic counts that help us make those decisions like we do with vehicles?
Yeah, so when our design team was out there, doing our initial traffic counts, for vehicles, that's what went off. And when traffic counts are stated, that's often what it's associated with, is counting cars. But along with that, we count bicycles, we count pedestrians, and note which direction they're traveling and whatnot. And those volumes of those are incorporated in the overall traffic models and analyses to ensure that they are accommodated at each of the intersections. However, obtaining that information for a number of, I'll say, the missing links, there's discontinuity in the sidewalks and paths that are out there. So obviously obtaining information in those areas isn't necessarily feasible, because there's not a facility there to walk or bike.
So without that same level of data, like, do we have to then rely on the pedestrians and the cyclists to self-report and so I'm assuming this kind of goes back to that mapping you were talking about earlier in the planning process.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a very important part of the project. So early on, back in 2018, when we had our original public engagement sessions, one of the displays that were presented was essentially represented a map of the project, and handed those out with a Sharpie, and asked folks that attended that meeting to basically sketch where they walked and biked, where they were coming from, where they were going, and where they wanted new or additional connections to be made. This information was extremely helpful in identifying what we were calling these missing links in this bike and pedestrian path network, and where those connections would be best located.
Okay, so we know that their needs and that the users of the roadway have throughout the process. They've told us like where they want to cross, where they are crossing. What do we do with all of that information? What's the next step?
Yeah, so that's like the fact-finding missions that we're on early in the project. So once we identify what the project needs are and gather all of these facts, the design team develops alternatives, which the idea is to meet the needs of all users, including bikes and pedestrians. So once the preferred alternative, the one that rises to the top, that best selects, or that's selected to best address those needs, proposed features are advanced through what we call preliminary engineering process, essentially to refine their design and configuration. Currently, the project we've moved out of preliminary engineering, and now we're in what's called final design, where all the fine details are being worked out and the final set of construction drawings are being prepared.
Okay, so why don't you break it down for us? What specifically is in the plan for the pedestrians and the cyclists?
Yeah, so this project it involves overall from beginning to end, which is just east of Holland Street to just west of Sassafras Street, that stretch of Bayfront Parkway, including those 3 intersections. Overall, there's more than 8,400 linear feet of walking and biking paths being constructed or reconstructed as part of the project. That's over 1.5 miles of sidewalks essentially. And of that, there's over 1,800 linear feet, which is about 1/3 of a mile of brand new paths that are basically being constructed to fill in some of those missing links. So you're definitely going to see some, replacing what is there, but we're also including some additional paths to complete that network. And a lot of those paths are going to be 10 feet in width to accommodate both pedestrians and bicyclists. So that's overall, that's the bike and ped path network. But kind of looking at a couple specific items here as well is, a feature included with the project that has a lot of folks excited about is the construction of the pedestrian bridge at the Holland Street intersection. That's essentially going to connect the neighborhoods and the city on the south directly to the amenities on the north side of the Bayfront, allowing both pedestrians and bicyclists to cross over the Bayfront Parkway without conflicting with any of the vehicular traffic down below. That bridge will essentially launch from the bluff on the south side, span the Bayfront Parkway on the eastern side of Holland Street, and then it'll have a ramp down structure on the north side to connect to the sidewalks that are being constructed over there. At both ends, at Sassafras and Holland Street, roundabouts are being proposed, and at those roundabouts, they will have raised crosswalks that'll have flashing beacons to alert approaching motorists that a pedestrian is in the crosswalk. In addition, those roundabouts will provide a median refuge island to essentially allow pedestrians just to cross one direction of traffic at a time. They'll be able to cross one lane, seek refuge in that pedestrian refuge island in the splitter island, and then look the other direction and then wait for a gap in traffic to safely proceed across the rest of the roadway. And then at State Street, right in the middle of the project limits, which happens to be a city street, bike lanes are being added on both sides of the roadway within our project limits. This is a feature that's consistent with the city's future plans for State Street. The other big improvement there, crossing the Bayfront Parkway at the intersection right there at State Street, the crosswalks are being reduced in length. Today, they're about 86 feet long to get across the Bayfront Parkway, and the proposed condition, they're only going to be about 31 feet, so about 1/3 of the distance. And not only that, but you're going to have much less vehicular traffic to cross, as the majority of the traffic are passing down below that raised intersection. Another feature at that intersection is that there's going to be an advanced pedestrian signal interval proposed, which will give pedestrians essentially a head start in crossing the street. This is a feature that's becoming very popular in urban areas, improving the visibility of pedestrians and making the crossings much safer. So those are the improvements, specific to bikes and peds that are being included with the PennDOT project. There are a number of projects that the Port Authority is undertaking to enhance, other things amongst bike and ped facilities along West Front Street, as well as Sassafras Street, the one-way roadway up the bluff. I believe that next month's podcast will feature a discussion of those projects.
Oh, you're stealing my thunder there, Jim. I was making that announcement later. Just kidding.
All right, sorry.
Just that's like a bridge, raised crosswalks, and the shortened crosswalk at State Street, and the buttons. It seems like, you know, you guys have really taken a lot of time to think about all of those safety and efficiency things that are directly affect pedestrians and cyclists, but there's got to be some indirect benefits, I mean, as well, you know, with this project. So, you know, what are those? Or maybe I ask a better way is, how will this project change the overall experience for those walking or cycling along the corridor?
Yeah, you know, safety is obviously number one, but experience, you know, of those pedestrians that are walking, or those cyclists that are biking, you know, that experience is going to be enhanced greatly. You know, not only will the project enhance, you know, the safety and those multimodal connections through and across that corridor, but the experience is going to be enhanced in several ways. So, you know, first and foremost, you know, traffic will be calmer and slower due to the roundabouts at either end of the project. You know, traffic's going to be moving much slower, and that you know, it's safer obviously, but it also provides a sense of calmness and enhances the experience for those that are you know, trying to walk or bike. Secondly, buffers between the paths and the roadway will be provided where feasible, to provide some separation, some horizontal separation from those vehicles driving along the Bayfront Parkway compared to those that are biking or walking on the paths. And lastly, landscaping. Landscaping's going to be implemented throughout the corridor, you know, to add visual appeal. It's going to soften a lot of the hardscape that's going in. And so, if folks are not familiar, there's you know, some simulations of that, you know, from both a flyover perspective as well as a pedestrian walking along the Bayfront Parkway or walking along State Street. There's simulations that kind of show you what, you know, conceptually what that experience will look like, and those are available on the project's website at www.bayfrontparkwayproject.com.
Yes, I've seen those videos, Jim, and they do really kind of add to the understanding of how things are going to change. So I will second what Jim is recommending there and tell folks go and check out those videos. It really gives you a firm understanding of how things are going to change down there. Well, we got a couple of questions from the public, and I think we have a couple minutes before we got to close up, so we'll try to get to both of those. First, this one came to us through Facebook, and I'm going to paraphrase it just a little bit to shorten it up. But as you improve the Bayfront and attempt to make accommodations for pedestrians and etc., will it result in more traffic and then the need for additional changes in a never-ending cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, with these proposed improvements, you know, they're not only anticipated to address, you know, the project's purpose and needs of today, but also in the future, you know, throughout our design year. So as part of our, you know, analysis, our current traffic volumes that we obtained early on, as part of the project, you know, we take those volumes, those traffic volumes, we grow them through that design year using, you know, both regional growth rates, as well as incorporating the anticipated traffic generated as a result of a lot of the private developments that are anticipated along that waterfront. So as a result of that, you know, the improvements are intended to operate adequately, you know, now, you know, once construction is complete, as well as into the future. In addition to that, you know, PennDOT is undertaking a project currently that complements the Bayfront Parkway project, which is enhancements along the 12th Street corridor. That project essentially consists of traffic signal replacements, as well as some modifications along that entire corridor of 12th Street between Interstate I-79 on the west and the Bayfront connector on the east. So improving efficiency through that corridor will help draw away some traffic from the Bayfront Parkway and onto that 12th Street corridor.
Excellent, thank you. Here's the second question we got from the public, and again, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but can you explain how pedestrians, cyclists, and motor vehicles will use the State Street intersection? I think they're, you know, curious about how all that movement is going to be happening there with the new layout of that intersection.
Yeah, so, you know, essentially all modes are going to be accommodated, and they're going to be accommodated in a very similar manner to what's out there today, but I will say on a smaller scale. So if you're a vehicle approaching the intersection from any directions, there'll be full turning movements that'll operate in a similar manner as it does today. You can turn off a Bayfront Parkway onto State Street in any direction, and vice versa. And then as a pedestrian, there's going to be crosswalks provided at all four sides of that intersection. But as I mentioned earlier, those crosswalks are going to be much shorter in length, across the Bayfront Parkway. And so, the intersection itself, the four-way intersection, it's going to be smaller, and there's going to be a lot less traffic on it because the majority of that traffic is going to be passing below the intersection. So, as a pedestrian or a bicyclist wanting to get across, there's going to be, a lot less conflicts, a lot slower traffic, less conflicts, and an enhanced, experience.
I think we have time for one more question, so I'm going to throw this one out there too. Has the design for the pedestrian bridge at Holland Street, has that been officially determined? And then, what happens with that bridge after it's built? Like, who's going to maintain it?
Yeah, so the pedestrian bridge at Holland Street was indeed determined to be the cable stay structure. So if you were at our September public outreach event in the fall this past September, there was a number of options. I think it was number 6 was the cable stay option. So it'll look similar to that. Essentially, there's going to be a large vertical mast that'll be located on the south side of the Bayfront Parkway, and a series of cables connecting the bridge spanning over the Bayfront Parkway. Those cables will connect to that bridge up to the vertical mast and then back down on the other side on the approach walkway, kind of forming like a triangle, so to speak, kind of almost replicating a sailboat. The decision was based on a lot of input received from the public during that outreach events, along with discussions with the city of Erie, who will ultimately own and maintain that structure with some assistance from a few private maintenance partners.
And Jim, is there a place where people might be able to see like a conceptual idea of what that bridge will likely look like, you were saying?
I believe there's some exhibits on the project website. I'll need to go back and double check that. But yeah, I think the project website.
Okay.
All good. Yeah, I think they're on there, but I'll have to double check to make sure that they are indeed.
Well, we can always put one out on the Facebook page as well in case anyone's interested and just wants a reminder of what that concept looked like in general. So, and with that, I think we're going to wrap up. It sounds like people who are going to be walking and biking along the Bayfront, whether it's for recreation or transportation, should be pretty excited because Jim has given us a lot of great information about all of the wonderful changes that are happening, including that bridge there at Holland near the bus depot and not far from the library. I can't imagine what an improvement that will really be for those folks that need to cross the Bayfront there, as well as the shortened crosswalks and other things that were mentioned. So thank you, Jim, for all the great information today. Any listeners who want to find out more about the Bayfront project and the pedestrian and bicycle features that are included, should go onto that website that Jim mentioned earlier, www.bayfrontparkwayproject.com. You can check out the frequently asked questions section. There's lots of information there, and there's renderings and videos just like Jim described earlier. So, excuse me. Just a reminder, starting next month, the program will be moving to the 4th Tuesday of the month. So our next live session of Let's Talk Bayfront will be February 22nd, and we will have Brenda Sandberg with us. She is the Executive Director of Erie Western PA Port Authority, which is located on Lake Erie right off the Bayfront. So she will be giving us an update on all the roadway related projects the authority has planned for the coming year and how they complement the Bayfront Central Corridor Plan. We hope that everyone listening today or to the recording will join us for that session and will bring their questions or send those questions along to us ahead of time. Check out the Bayfront Parkway Project Facebook group and the website for the link to join us live. Thank you again, Jim. Lots of great information. Thank you to our producer, Hannah Stiller, and everyone have a great day.